All right, so week 7, our second and final in this round. We'll come to some more develop its after we do the next code up section. But this is where we really find out how well we did as far as getting the information and experience and knowledge to you for you to create something. Now, I have to say this because of what happened, at least so far, because I am on the Friday before this is due. If you use code from the web, you must give credit where you got that code. And if you get inspiration, then must give me those references, right? And I had a couple people give me references, and it was great because I could go look at it and I could see what they did with what that was as far as the HTML and CSS last week, right? So I tell you what, right now you should be in your notes, right? My notes, taking a few notes here. Okay, so you should be in here, and this would be your week 7, and in this case it would be your develop it. Matter of fact, you just give it another heading, develop it 2 here. So you have to do that, and it's so just don't put yourself in a situation, because here's the thing, and they talked about this when you went over the JavaScript, the weird parts, right? Don't intimidate, don't well, what's the word? Don't imitate, learn, right? Learn how to write this code. So that's was my whole point there. It took me a minute to grab the word, but so that's the thing, right? So I need to be able to judge your code, and if it's not your code, I need to know that so that I can grade it accordingly. But if you got inspiration, I want to see what you took and then created on your own, right? So the other thing is about this is it has to work, right? Your code must be without errors, right? So if your code physically, if it doesn't run, is one thing, and then because one of the first things I'm going to do is look at the console to see if there's any errors when I run it, right? So and it has to actually do something. So as I've said before, you need to implement event listeners on an array of items or images or something else, whatever you choose. Has to respond to the user story, or has to be a response. So last week you wrote the user story, this is the implementation of that, right? And has to be well documented. So I'm actually going to show you what I mean by documented, because I just spent about 30 minutes documenting mine. So let me show you what I mean. So here's what I did on the very bottom, because I followed the same bottom up process that they use in the autogram, calling the initiation, initialize events, right? First thing that happens in the program is it calls this, right? And then I say this function calls get cards array, right? So it calls this and it returns it into here. So, and then I talk about that, and then, right, and then I use for each to iterate over all the items in the array to add click handlers for each div, or in this case each card for me. Okay, so this is the level of documentation I want, right? So, and this also illustrates the idea of these functions that do very concise things, right? So inputs and outputs, and it's clear what it's doing. So then, walking through the next step. So then on the get cards array here, right, it's querying the DOM. That's what query selector all is for the divs with the class of flex item, right? And that's I've chosen, I should say that it's a global variable up there, right? Down a little further here, right? And then the resulting node list, because this is actually part of what the Big Nerd Ranch talked about, is when you get this back, it's a node list, and then it's converted into an actual real array so that you can run functions, methods on it. And that's what this does. And then it returns the card array, right, to here, that then runs for the click handler, right? So here's what is added to each of the divs, and I talk about this, right? So adds an event listener to each item in the array, the divs with, and I just express it here both in what it does and really what it's ultimately looking at as far as the DOM, right? The divs with the flex item class. Then it calls flip card, right? So which I'll cover that in a minute with the card, the div, so it passes that as a parameter. Then it adds one to the click global, so it's keeping track of the clicks, and then if it's less than 3, meaning 1 or 2, then it handles the click condition and queries a DOM for which cards the user has selected. If click equals 2, then it compares the cards is run with the user selection, and that's what this is showing down in here. Now as I reviewed this, I thought there is a better way I could do this, and I think I will do this, may go on my to-do list, which I'll show you in a minute, but I'm going to actually do this because I could do this in a case statement or in a switch statement. This would really work well actually here. So, but anyway, so then on each, so then flip card, right? So then up here, right, is in this function is passed a card, a div, and it checks to see if it's already been flipped because they could actually click real quick. There's other things I thought about in preventing them from doing some of the things that logically would happen, but not for today. And if not, then it added the flip class into the div, which flips the card. Okay. So then down here, it actually, here we get the user selection, and then if the user selection is, again, we're counting the user selection if there's 2 of these, right? And I could actually do clicks as well here, but then it compares the card, and this is probably the most involved function that I have, which is I get, I get it called with those selection, so in this case I have 2 of them, and then I create a variable looking in the get element by ID. This is actually one of my to-do items that I haven't done that I need to, which is to change this from get element by tag name to actually querying against the data attribute, and I'm going to do that. But still, it's really just a matter of a line here change, because one way or the other I have to figure out what is cat1 and what is cat2. Then I compare them, and you can read up here what this says, right? Each set of cat has a unique alt attribute, and that it is determined if the cat has the same cat1 cat1 cat2 variables. And then it does. If they're equal, it sets a timeout, which is basically a delay there, and then it removes those things from the DOM, and I talk about this in here. That's what the remove does. And then if they're not equal, then I just set the timeout again, a little bit of a delay, and then they're flipped back. Okay, so my to-do list, now I don't require this, but this is just for me, and I think it'd be good if you have some things that you hope to implement but didn't, right, is to change the cat selection to data attribute, like I said, and update the footer div with feedback on the user play. So those would be things that I know I'll do because it'd just be fun to do that. Okay, so I'm just giving you really this to both go over what I did, and also that's what I would expect to see from you, is that style of function writing, that style of documentation that I can read and understand what your code is doing. Okay, so and you need to write each line of this code yourself. This is kind of an iteration of before. And this is actually what I guess I already had this in here. I thought I hadn't, but I had, right? So you can't use something you can't explain and understand and write it in the style that I'm asking for. And a couple of you missed this, so make sure you do it, is update your root index file with the link to your project. Actually, it should say project there, and then do your normal workflow. Okay, so should be a few things here also, and I think the last thing I'm going to have you do is this, and actually some of you did it on your submission, so but in here in your notes, right, also give me, right, like your feedback about this process, right? Do you feel you were well prepared to do this, to implement this code with these requirements? Do you feel like you understood it? Just whatever, right? Because again, I'm working on making this course better, because this is the first time I've taught it in this particular way online and doing these particular steps. So you help future students by doing that, and I can already see some things I would change. But so in addition to just looking at whatever you've submitted, make sure you have a few things in there, and I'll just put it. Matter of fact, we'll do this right here. We'll just do this. So develop it 2, or yeah, 2, right? and then give me, like I said, there are a couple of things there to make sure. I want to make sure you understand if you do get code, you must give credit, and if you get inspiration, you must give me references. And actually, credit means a reference, and in this case, inspiration, like I said before, I'm just iterating. Because I get it. I totally get it. And I want you to know this is that I understand that this is the way the web works, right? That you just go find somebody else's code and you do the effort just to make sure it works. But that's not the idea of this course, and it's not serving you to do that. It serves you to actually write, because it really tests you to see how well you can create something. And for whatever future you want, you want to be able to do that. I'm not saying that it's not a good skill to look at somebody else's code and understand how to make it work. That is a good skill, but that's not what we're here to do. We're here to develop something. All right. Enough of my rant or my soapbox or whatever you want to call it. Have a good one. Talk to you later.